Welcome back to another episode of Right Here in Mass. Joining me today is Elisa Chan, who joined G9 Financial as a partner in 2020. Elisa prides herself on taking the time with her clients to explain things clearly so they feel control of their decision making when it comes to their finances. Elisa, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Ashley. Thank you for having me.
It is my pleasure. I am very much looking forward to this episode. And for our listeners, Elisa's full bio is in the show notes. You can get a feel for who she is and what she does. But I'd love to start off by having you share, Elisa, who you are and what you do.
Like Ashley mentioned, my name is Elisa Chan. I am a partner at G9 Financial. We are financial advisors and we are a full-blown financial planning firm.
Awesome. And so, since you started in 2020, as of the time of this recording, you've been with the firm for about 5 years. And I believe you had your own firm previously. Is that right?
Exactly. So before joining G9 Financial, so I've been in financial planning since November of 2009. I was with a previous broker-dealer. It wasn't an independent broker-dealer, and we weren't independent advisors. A series of events happened in March of 2020 or early 2020, and it wasn't COVID. And I was looking for a switch, and Dan, one of my business partners now, reached out and said, "How about you join us?" So I was between either joining G9 Financial, or I was just gonna leave my previous broker dealer, start with the broker dealer that I have now, which they are independent advisors, and that means a lot for me and my clients, just building a business. And with a lot of thinking and pondering regarding what to do next, I decided to go with G9 Financial, and I've been very happy with my decision.
I love it. And you brought up a good point about being an independent advisor. So, for anyone who's listening who might not be familiar with what that means, could you explain that?
Yeah, so every financial advisor is associated with a broker-dealer. So that broker-dealer can be an insurance company, or it could be like my broker-dealer, which is Cambridge Investment Research, is just strictly a broker-dealer. So in my case, I am not forced or bound to sell their products, even though Cambridge Investment Research doesn't have any products. They don't have any investments. They don't have any annuities or life insurance or investment platforms. It forces me to go out into the marketplace to
Hmm.
shop around for the client. And then I would have to choose what's best for the client. So I don't have, did you sell so many of X products of our company? We don't have any of that. And that gives me the freedom to just be a fiduciary for the clients and do what's best for them.
Yeah, and that was, I'm glad that you mentioned that because that was one thing I was going to say is that you don't have that bias that you would have if you had to push certain products. And then you know that it will always be in your client's best interest because you're truly doing all of that research and really finding the best fit.
Yeah, and being an independent advisor doesn't mean that it's the wild, wild west. Every financial advisor does need a broker dealer. It's just that in my case, we are independent broker. Cambridge is an independent broker dealer, which make us an independent advisors.
Yes, exactly.
So we
And
still
so,
have all the licensing, compliance,
mhm.
all the stuff that all the financial advisors hate to deal with. That's still part of the game. It's just it gives us the freedom to be a better fiduciary for our clients.
Absolutely. And since it's been 5 years since joining G9 Financial, I'd love to hear how things have changed in a good way since then. Of course, you've grown so much, the firm has grown so much, and I'd love to hear about any exciting accomplishments or what's come out of it in the past few years.
Well, since I joined G9 Financial in 2020, I became a mom for the second time. We welcomed Sophia, our daughter, in the midst of a global pandemic, changing broker dealers, which feels like you're getting divorced and remarrying someone else, um, transitioning all my clients that wanted to join me. So that was 2020, which is pretty busy.
Mhm.
Since then, I recently just got my certified financial planner certificate, my CFP, and that happened late last year, and I'm very proud of it. It took years. studying as an adult and a business owner and a mom it was the hardest thing I think I've done.
Yeah.
Um, to juggle all of it. But I think those are the two main accomplishments that I can think of the top of my head that has happened since I've joined G9. And obviously, but the business has grown and
Hmm.
it's just been a lot of fun to work here and to service our clients.
Yes, I love it. And so, for people listening, I think when people think of working with a financial advisor, there's almost like a false assumption that they need to have a ton of money or they need to be wealthy in order to work with a financial advisor. But really, anyone can and should be working with an advisor. So, could you talk more about the importance of working with a financial advisor and having that financial plan?
Yeah, a lot of people think like I need to have X amount of money to work with a financial advisor. And some financial advisors you do. Some
Hmm.
financial advisors do have a account minimum. At G9, we don't have an account minimum. We do charge a financial planning fee to get that whole plan together. But in terms of assets minimum, we don't. We feel that everyone deserves a financial plan, everyone deserves the education. And a lot of the time is not how much money you make, is what you do with it. And a lot of times, if you're a young professional, it's the time that you have that makes the huge difference, the hugest difference. So you can come to me at age 65, you make $1 million a year, but if you haven't saved anything, we don't have a magic wand that we can make a retirement happen within the next few years.
Hmm.
But if you have a reasonable income and you have a um, long years ahead of you and 30 years, 20 years, that money compounds year over year over year. So sometimes it feels like you're just putting just a little bit, but it's not because that money just keeps creating a little snowball and snowball. One of my biggest clients today, he was never a big earner throughout his years. He's in his 70s now, but he was a good saver and he did the right planning early on that has set him to success today. So I always like to bring him and I always keep him in mind just because you don't have to make a lot of money to in order to have a great retirement. It's just you need to plan and you need to save and you need the time because time right now is the biggest asset.
Yes, you're absolutely right. And when people think of a financial plan, of course, someone's financial plan is absolutely customized to them, their goals, their
Exactly.
lifestyle, etc. But what typically goes into a financial plan? Like, what are some of the things that people think that they should probably have as part of that as they plan for the life ahead?
In terms of questions or in terms of the things that they need to have.
Both, whatever you think is good to mention.
So I feel like most financial plans, it really depends on the individual, right? But a lot of
Mhm.
times we like to see people with insurance products just because that is the foundation, life insurance, especially if you have kids, especially if you have large debt. Disability insurance is a big one. The chances of you becoming disabled is a lot greater than you dying in the next 5 years. So like for example, the probability of me dying the next 20 years is very small, but the probability of me becoming disabled um, is a lot greater. So we do focus on that insurance products. And then we also focus on have clients having different buckets, right? A lot of times people sock away money or all of their savings into like a 401k or an IRA or some form of retirement account, but that's just pushing them into a corner that account, it can only be touched at a specific year, is taxed in a very specific way. So we like to see clients having different types of accounts that it's also taxed a little bit different as well, because we want to have the flexibility of building your own tax bracket or if you need money beforehand. Obviously, an emergency fund, it's always an important one, no matter how much money you have, just to give you some liquid assets in case, life doesn't go always according to plan.
Yeah.
So I think those are some of the few items that I would mention that I like to see my clients having, and usually I do recommend those.
That's great. And you mentioned a good point too about recommending people have different accounts, which makes me think of the importance of diversity and not having all of your eggs in one basket. And it sounds like that's something that you really recommend is kind of not going all in on one thing, but making sure you're kind of spreading out depending on what your goals are.
Yeah, I think a lot of people use that terminology more on the type of investment, like the mutual fund, the stock, but I'm using more in terms of like, how is that account taxed?
Mm,
What are the restrictions on that account? I'm using more in that form versus the actual stock or the actual mutual fund or whatever the investment is.
yeah, absolutely. And when people are putting together their financial plan with an advisor, it seems like a lot of that goes back to what they actually want to be able to use their money for, like what goals they have for their life. And so I imagine that you may have chatted with people before who are like, well, I don't know what I want to achieve in life, or I don't know what I want to use my money for. And so, how do you kind of help people navigate that as they think about what they want to be able to save for or what they hope to do with their money in the future?
Yeah, I think when we talk to people, number one goal is retirement
Hmm.
across the board. I think number two for young professionals will be like buying a house or a big purchase like that. Um, because financial security means different things to different people. Uh, Being well off financially means different things to different people. So it's very hard to kind of pinpoint on that. A lot of times people have a bucket of money and they don't know what to do. So we keep it flexible. Like I usually call that opportunity bucket. You never know when a business might be available to purchase. So if they want to jump into that, or if they want to buy a house, or if there's a wedding that they want to plan. But I think number one would be retirement on everybody's bucket list, except for business owners. Most often, business owners usually say, "Oh, I'll never retire. I'll do this forever." And that seems very unlikely because you don't know if you're going to be healthy enough to
Right.
continue doing. Like, for example, I could do this in my 90s, but will I have the mental capacity, right? I don't want to, but you have to think about like, will you have the mental capacity to keep going until age 90? Would you like to sell it? If you do like to sell it, who would buy it? Who would you just sell it for? Um, but th those are just some of the things.
Yeah, and that's a great point too, that I mean, unfortunately, we won't be around forever, whether it's death or whether, like you said, if there's a disability that comes around. So being able to plan for that is important.
Yeah, but I think the financial planning too is just like you plan for different instances in life,
Hmm.
right? And I have a client who she might want to retire. She still likes what she does, so she's going to continue. But if something were to happen, which it did, right? That plan is already in place that if she wants to work, it's because if she's working, it's because she wants to. If
Yeah.
she's retiring, it's because she has the opportunity to. She's not working because she needs to. So a lot of the times with these plans, we'll put different scenarios into place. And just to see like if this happens, this is what's going to look like. If option B happens, this is what the plan will look like. So
Hmm.
whatever life throws your way, we're kind of like ahead of the curve.
Yes, which I think is so important. Like the importance of being proactive rather than reactive is really where you guys step in.
Exactly.
Yeah, I love that. And so when it comes to someone working on their finances, what are the benefits of working with a professional like yourself compared to them trying to DIY it or really just do it all on their own?
Ooh, I think when you Google anything, that recommendation is meant for the general public, right? That recommendation on the internet, it doesn't know how you feel about risk. They don't know how you feel about money in general. They don't know your family's background. So I think that is the biggest difference. When you anything, or if you listen to a recommendation on a money podcast or financial podcast, those recommendations are so broad and they're for the general public. And you're not the general public, right? When you look at yourself as an individual, you're not the general public. Um, but those are very broad. So I think that's kind of, again, some of them are very good recommendations, but does it apply to you?
Mhm.
Sometimes yes, sometimes no. Is there another strategy that could work better? Sometimes yes, sometimes no. So I think that is the biggest difference between working with someone 101 versus working or just doing a Google search and saying like, what can I do?
Yeah, and that's a really good point because like there's so much information out there, especially with AI. AI doesn't always give factual information when people use it. And so
Yeah.
by someone working with a professional who's been in the industry and knows all the ins and outs, that's of course going to be a much better option for them.
Yeah, it's funny regarding AI. So my husband is a doctor, and sometimes he just uses AI just to see what the response would be. And he goes, half the time, half the answer is right, half the answer is wrong.
Yeah.
So I think it's very hard to take those recommendations and just kind of use your hard work money to apply it.
Yeah, exactly. And it also makes me think too that there are situations that may affect someone's finances that are out of their control. Like, for example, maybe the political climate with any administration or anything that, like a pandemic, that kind of changed that as well. And so when people go through these different environmental changes, I guess is the best way to put it, that really can impact their money. Like, what would you say to them for just kind of navigating those waters when they kind of just have to roll with the punches?
Funny you say that because we've been getting lots of calls of clients with fear, and
Hmm.
their fears are real. But we build plans to go through the storm, not around the storm.
Yeah.
Um, and I think that is the advantage of working with advisors versus just if you're on your own. Because if you are one of my clients that called me basically last week, she would have sold everything out of her investments and just kept it in cash because she's so fearful. So then I would have, what I did is I went back to the plan, I explained her accounts, where they're invested, what are the scenarios that might happen. And she felt a lot better afterwards. A lot of
Mhm.
times it's talking the clients out of the cliff, right? Before they
Yeah.
make stupid decisions. A lot of people, money is very emotional. So
Hmm.
we try, emotion is part of the plan, but we try to take some of the emotions out, especially during a lot of changes happening in the government right now, or during a pandemic, or the market only was down for, I believe, don't quote me on this, like maybe 40 days during 2020, like the biggest dips. But
Hmm.
then it went back up. So if those people are fearful and they're selling out, then when they're back in the market, they're buying at a high and they lost so much opportunity. And we want to build plans that goes through the storm, not around it. And volatility is part of the market. Sometimes people forget when we have a couple of good years.
Yes, yes, you nailed that. And I'm so glad that you brought up emotions and money because it's real. I mean, people feel vulnerable around their money. There's so many emotions tied to it. I've read so many interesting articles about how we learn our money habits from our parents or our guardians, like earlier generations. And so that comes, I don't want to say with like baggage, but it comes with like some preconceived notions or thoughts about it. And so I think it's really, really great that you brought that up because it's real.
Yeah, I talk to whenever I get a new client and it's a financial planning client, I always say there's two sides of financial planning. There's the math side, which is very black and white, and there's the emotional side. We
Hmm.
have to marry those two together in order to come to a plan. And the plan is obviously I have my recommendations and this is my professional opinion, but it's a two-way dialogue. I want to hear from them as well because the plan might look beautiful, it might make sense, but if it doesn't sit well with them, then it's not a good plan. I don't want to put a
Hmm.
plan in place that every day they're going to bed worrying about their money, worrying about their investments, worrying about their future. That's not a good plan either. So we have to find that balance that they feel comfortable with it, but it also makes sense financially and mathematically wise, and then their emotions are okay with it.
Yes, exactly. And so, like you said, being able to have both sides of the equation, it just puts them at ease and makes them feel like they have a little bit more peace of mind when it comes to that.
Yeah, because again, at the end of the day, it's their money.
Hmm.
They can listen to us or not listen to us, or they can go somewhere in between, but most people do. But it's truly finding that middle ground between your emotions and how you grew up and what do you think about money and your views about money and the math part of financial planning and putting those two together.
Yes, definitely. And on this track of like the emotional piece and kind of how you learned about money, people like you said can probably really understand the whole math piece, but sometimes it's like that mindset part that's still kind of like blocking them from moving forward. Do you have any like strategies or recommendations that you usually share with clients to help them get past that emotional part? Or I'm curious to hear if there's any kind of like breakthroughs you've helped them work through.
I don't think there's one magic way to do it, but
Mhm.
what I've been doing for the last 2 years, I do baby steps, right? They get the account, maybe it's not all of their money if that's the case, then slowly we build that plan in together. So I would say baby steps versus doing all at once and then having a panic attack and then we have to backtrack. I'd rather build on it versus stepping back on it.
Yeah, that's a great point. And as of the time of this recording, we're in the middle of March. So we're in the middle of tax season, and tax season is a really important thing to kind of communicate with about your financial planner after the fact, like once you get your tax return. So could you talk about how people should be working with their financial advisor once they get their tax returns from a CPA and really how that could benefit them to really partner and work with both types of professionals?
There's a few things that you can do right before tax season, which is like catching up to your IRA contributions or Roth contributions. Obviously, that's going to change between person to person. So there's a few things that we can do right before tax season. Most of the things that we do is between January and December in terms of tax planning. Um, I think the best way that you could work with your advisor is once you file your taxes, bring your tax return to your financial advisor and let them review it and see if there's any other strategies that you might maximize or apply for the year of 2025. So I'm just going to find an example. You might be right above the next tax bracket. So we can find little strategies that we can save taxes that way. Or it could be other strategies too. But I think let someone else see your tax return and see if there's anything else that we could do.
Yeah. And it's like the whole idea of you should be able to, like working with someone like you will help people find a way to make their money work for them rather than the other way around. They work for their money.
Yeah, because a lot of times the tax or the accountant or the CPA, whoever is filing your taxes, their focus is on saving taxes that year,
Hmm.
where the financial planner is looking more of a long-term view. Okay, you're saving $2,000 this year, but you could save more if you do a different type of strategy, but still pay that 2,000 extra on taxes. So we
Hmm.
have more of a long-term view, and I think accountants and CPAs look more on this year's tax and how much can we save? Because again, for them, if you get a tax return or a tax refund, it looks good, right? But what's the rest of the story? Are you going to
Yeah.
pay taxes later on? So I feel like we have two sets two sets of lenses and but it's good to have both the accountant and CPA and the financial advisor working together. And we have those calls all the time together.
Yes, absolutely. And it's funny that you bring that part up about how people might think that a tax refund or whatever is a good thing, but like the way I think of it is I'm like, oh, if I get like a refund or I get money back, then I'm like, well, then I just paid too much. And so now the government just is using my money and it's like not really the best thing. It's
Yeah, the
not like
best
it's
ways,
necessarily a good
yeah.
thing.
Yeah, the best way is when you're filing your taxes is like you're getting very little back or you're paying very
Mhm.
little to the government. Like the math should be quite there, but sometimes people like getting those $25,000 tax refund. And I personally wouldn't, but some people do.
Yes, exactly. And you also brought up another good point too about like a financial advisor will help someone with the longevity, like the long-term planning. And that a part of that is the fact that many changes will happen in someone's life throughout that long-term planning, whether it's like you mentioned earlier, getting a new house or perhaps having a child or anything like that. And so I'd love for you to talk more about the importance of updating your financial plan as your life kind of goes through those changes.
So I always say that your financial planning is like a live document. It's
Hmm.
constantly changing and it constantly needs updating because your life today is not going to be your life in 10 years and in 20 years. Once we have the base of the financial plan, it's easier to just tweak as time goes on.
Hmm.
But it does need to be updated. Just because you have one idea or one goal today of the year 2025 doesn't mean that you have to stick with that goal. You can change your goals, you can change your mind. And that's okay. And that's not a problem at all. We just have to keep those documents updated to reflect your new goals, to reflect
Yes.
your new plan. So it's not like people come and say like, oh, here's a financial plan and that's done forever for life. It's not. It's what we have today and the information that we have today. And it's also the regulation and taxes that we have today. And those also changes with time and no different than estate planning, right? I'm
Right.
currently redoing all of my estate planning because when we did it, I didn't I don't even think I had any of my kids.
Mm.
So my life is very different being a mom of two versus just being newly married. I have different problems, I would say. They're not
Yeah.
bad, it's just what it is, different concerns. So we're updating that too because things change, your life changes. And again, we also have to be aware of like law changes, regulation changes, IRS changes, and all of that.
Yes, and that actually that you brought up is a really good reason for why working with a professional like yourself is so important because of all of these changes that might be happening with the IRS, with the federal government, like with any types of laws, working with a professional who's constantly up to date on all of that stuff and really kind of has their finger on the pulse is really, really beneficial. So I love that you mentioned that because things do change over time and it's important to stay on top of it.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. And so I'm curious to hear like about your specific career journey with financial planning. Like what inspired you to follow this career path? Did you always know that this was
Um,
what you wanted to do or what led you here?
I had no idea what I wanted to do in life, basically. So I have like a business degree, which is a very broad degree.
Hmm.
But I knew I wanted to be in a consulting role and talking to people versus sitting behind a desk. Um, so this is like 15 years ago where I place my resume on monster.com and one other search engine. I don't even know if those exist anymore. And a bunch of financial companies reached out. Like, this would be a good fit for you. This would be a good fit. At that point, I picked a broker dealer. I stayed with that broker dealer for about 10, 11 years until I switched um, to Cambridge Investment Research, which I am now. So I've been doing this for since almost off out of college.
Mm.
Started when I was 24, so I'm turning 40. So it's been a while.
Yeah, and it's so interesting to hear just that path that you had a business degree and you didn't know what you wanted to do, and just because you had heard from financial planning companies, now this is what why where you are today,
Yeah,
ultimately.
it's not like I applied, said that I want to be a financial planner. That was not the plan. I did not know what type of response I would get or what type of companies would reach out, but it just happened. I just kind of fell into it. Uh,
Yeah.
there was like no goals that one day I want to be a financial planner. I want to be a financial advisor. That was not the case.
And for anyone listening who might also be in that situation where they may be considering entering this industry for the first time, what advice would you have for them for just getting started?
It is a tougher industry. Not saying it is the toughest out there, but the turnaround is a lot for some
Mm,
of these broker dealers. Um, I would say find a broker dealer that fits your style. Um, find a broker dealer that will give you the resources, that will give you the education. Find a mentor that you can lean on and study a lot because there's a lot of licensing and tests and exams in order to sell any insurance or sell any investment products. So there is a part of the education that you have to commit.
hmm. Yeah, that's a great point.
And
I'm glad
it's
that you brought up the
constantly learning,
mentorship.
right? Like it's
Yeah.
like I've been 16 years in 15 years. It's constantly learning, it's constantly doing CE credits, because you have to keep up with the market. So if you like, if you're a good student, maybe if you're good with people too, because a lot of times we're dealing with people. I mean, we are dealing with people. So you need to
Hmm.
have that like good personal skills, but also be a good student. So a combination of those two, I guess.
Yeah, no, that's a great point that you brought up about being able to talk with people because I don't want to necessarily say that a financial advisor can sometimes feel almost like being a therapist, but it kind of is like that in a sense. I mean, people come to you with like life challenges that they're going through or concerns that they have. And so kind of being able to talk them through those problems, I think is a really big part of what you do. And so, like you said, having those personal skills is huge for just being able to make people feel comfortable
Yeah.
and confident.
Like even with your best friend, like you're not sharing your personal finances with her or him.
Right.
Do you know what I mean? Like something that we hold it so dear, like and close to our hearts that we're not sharing that information out there. So I know like people's struggles, people's fears, they share like the worst, and sometimes people are embarrassed.
Hmm.
So there's literally no judgment. It is what it is at that point, right? And then we'll just try to work through it. But I think a lot of psychology and being a therapist at certain moments is definitely has played in my career. And
Yeah.
especially now, there's a lot of people with fear. So we've been having a lot of those conversations about decreasing some of the fear. Again, how they feel is how they feel, and that's very appropriate. I mean, not appropriate, but it's you can't take that away from people,
Hmm.
but just walk people through the scenarios of their plan.
Yes, absolutely. And if there's one last piece of advice or perspectives that you could give in regards to your finances, like what would that be? I kind of like to describe it as like, what's the hill that you would die on when it comes to your money?
One thing,
Or you could say
I,
a few, whatever you would like.
I would say start early for younger professionals. And I would say for people who are nearing retirement, I would say make sure that you are allocated appropriately.
Mm,
Because climbing the mountain is easier than going down the mountain. And when you're starting a distribution, you want to make sure that that portfolio is very well put together.
yeah, great piece of advice. And for one last fun question, what are your favorite local businesses to support?
Oh boy, I'm gonna pick Faux Sure. It's a Vietnamese restaurant. I'm not Vietnamese, but I love their noodle soups. I always get the spicy wee bowl. They just changed locations to a bigger spot. It's very nice, but it's a little further away from my house. So I'm not happy about that. And I think we're there at least once a week.
Oh my gosh, I love that. Spicy noodles sounds delicious.
Yes. Yes.
Elisa, this has been such a great episode, and I've really enjoyed having you on the show. And now
Thank you for having me.
I'd love to have you share with our listeners where they can find you online in case they'd like to reach out and connect further.
Yes, so you can find me at www.g9 the number 9 financial.com, and you just click on contact us and my picture should be right there.
Perfect. And I will link to that in the show notes. That way our listeners will easily have the link available. But thank you so much again for coming on today's show.
Thank you.